This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
As followers of Jesus, in whom all things were made, we acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the country on where this podcast is recorded. We recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters and thank them for protecting this land and its ecosystems since time immemorial. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future, and we extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening today.
He was a young man. He weighed 30 kilos. He was 170 centimeters tall. It's like he couldn't open his bottom jaw in the normal way. And so he could still get food in, but he couldn't chew. And so helping him get to a healthy weight was finding strategies and finding things that he could still kind of get in between his teeth to help him gain weight. I needed to get him to about 43 kilograms. You don't do that in a night.
I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that reminds you of the good in the world. Each episode tells the story of someone who has found real hope in challenging times and made the world a better place. Episode 55, Jess Mepstead. On episode 55 of this podcast, I'm so excited to have a little bit of a full circle moment. My very first Finding Hope episode over 2 years ago was with a woman called Merryl Mackenzie, who shared of her many years' experience working on Mercy ships, providing life-saving surgeries to those in need in Africa. Today, I interviewed Jess Mepstead, who served as a dietitian on Mercy ships and knows Merryl quite well. She is now studying to become a doctor, with the hope of one day returning to Mercy ships as a surgeon. But Jess's journey has not been without roadblocks. It's an honour to welcome her today. Let's meet her. Thank you so much for being here, Jess. Really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure, Georgia.
Now, Jess, if you had to introduce yourself to a stranger, what would you say? Who is Jess?
So I'm a Christian who's trying to really hard to live a life that it's honouring God. So this would be to a Christian stranger, possibly, as opposed to a non-Christian stranger. But so I'm a dietitian, I'm a medical student, and I'm someone who's really interested in healthcare. And I suppose health and a healthy lifestyle might be some key points that I use about myself.
Yeah, that's great. What actually drew you to the dietitian profession in the first place? Because you'd kind of decided ever since you were in high school that you wanted to be a dietitian.
So I, for the first part of high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And people ask you that question of what do you want to be when you grow up? And I really wasn't sure. And so was actually my mum. She said, go to the careers advisor and have a chat with them. And so I reluctantly went and she asked me and she said, what do you like? And I was like, I like sport and I like teaching people and I like cooking. And she said, well, why don't you become a dietitian? And I was like, that sounds like a good idea. I just kind of hung on to that. And I kind of had a picture of myself as a dietitian working in an office where people would come and see me one-on-one. And I would, prescribe a diet for them and talk about things that they could do better to eat better. And so I just kind of held on to that. And that took me all the way through uni. And along the way, I haven't really ended up working in that exact kind of setting, but it's been far more interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Definitely far cry from a office setting, I should say. You kind of moved around, worked in different hospitals throughout the state. What was that experience like? What does a dietitian in a hospital actually do?
So in a hospital, the dietitian's role is a lot about supporting people's recovery and their health, finding the ways that nutrition can help someone either to recover from illness or try and prevent recurrence of illness. And so in the hospital, a lot of our focus actually becomes, instead of on making sure people get enough fruit and vegetables, which still is important, but in the hospital, our focus becomes more on getting enough calories and enough protein, which, to be honest, is much more fun, in my opinion, and much more interesting. And so it's a lot of education. It's a lot of finding ways to help people eat when they really don't want to. to, because the majority of people that are in hospital, they're sick and they really don't feel good, and maybe they're nauseous, maybe they're vomiting, maybe they're getting medications that have the goal of making them feel better, but one of the flip sides is that they don't feel hungry. So a lot of my role in those places is to help people find ways to eat in for that period of time, so that they can recover quicker, so they can go home quicker, so that they can get better quicker. And so it's just quite different. And then once people have kind of got to the point where they are ready to go home, there's also a lot of education that happens in terms of teaching people what can they do in the future to continue to try and maintain good health through the things that they eat. Yeah, it's quite different from, like, we're not the nutrition police, and we get to have a little bit more fun in the hospital, I feel. I'm like, okay, all right, I've got this patient in front of me. Maybe they're 70 years old and they're really not hungry. And it's like, have you eaten your ice cream today? have you drunk your flavored milk or your nutrition supplement drink that I've given you today? So it becomes quite a different kind of facet for health, where it's the focus is on acute recovery, as opposed to like those really long-term kind of healthy eating habits. So still are important, but are just not quite the focus in the hospital setting.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I love that you get to prescribe dessert. That's so good.
It's my favorite thing.
You've worked in a whole bunch of different hospitals in Sydney and throughout the state. Was there any difference in terms of working in regional-based hospitals, in terms of resources and how things are run?
Absolutely. The difference is just massive. It's just huge. Just in terms of what people have access to in the city compared to regionally is just worlds apart. It's in terms of the specialist doctors that they might need, or even how quickly, if someone needs maybe a special medication, or from the diet perspective, we've got a new nutrition supplement we want them to have, or maybe this person can't eat and they actually are getting fed through a nasogastric tube, and they need a special feed to go through that. There's a time factor that comes in for all of them. So in the city, it might only take a day or two to get what we need. But if we've got a special request regionally, it could take a week or a couple of weeks, and it's massive. But then even once people have left the hospital, or the care that they can receive outside the hospital, that changes as well, because regionally there's a great need. And so it's much more difficult to access specialist care. So whether that's an ophthalmologist, or maybe it's surgery. A lot of the time people, they have healthcare needs, but to have those needs met, they have to travel for hours. And even just to get to the hospital where I was working, they might have to travel for 3 hours just to get to us, but then we can't do or provide what they need, and then they have to keep going all the way to Sydney, and so that's another 4 hours, and that just becomes complicated and difficult, because if you're if you are that person, if you are that patient, and you have healthcare problems, that's a really hard kind of place in your life to be in, and to then have to be away from family, be away from friends, be away from your normal supports while you're going through maybe a healthcare crisis. That's really hard. And so it's a big difference. And then if we then flip that, so in the times that I have worked in the city, and I have had the privilege of seeing patients who are in that situation of being away from home. Yeah, it's quite a different conversation that happens, because it's okay, all right, so while you're here, I'm going to support you as best as I can. But then we have to try and make a plan for when you go home and when you go back regionally and or remote or wherever you are. Okay, so who's going to help you? Who's going to help you when you leave? And so it's very, very different, what people have access to. And so it's very hard sometimes, working in that space, a privilege, but still challenging.
Jess, I'd love to talk about your experience with Mercy Ships. And this goes back to the time that you were 12 or 13. The Logos Hope ship came to Sydney and completely kind of changed your life. Tell me about that.
It did. So when I was just in the early years of high school, I went and visited the Logos Hope ship when it came to Sydney. My parents were there, and I think my brothers came, and I remember being on this ship and walking around it. And I think they had like a big part of that is part of their outreach is with books. And we went into their bookshop kind of in the center of the ship and got a tour. And I just remember coming away with this impression of like, oh, this is really cool. Like this ship will go to like really interesting places and they're going to be ministering to people. And I just thought it sounded really exciting. And so I kind of held on to this idea of like, oh, it'd be really cool to like go and work on this ship one day. But somewhere along the way, I think I've just kind of like every few years, I'll just kind of Google it and just be like, okay, Christian, ship, volunteer. And I think somewhere along the way, I've come across mercy ships using those keywords because it wasn't until I was actually on my way to mercy ships, which was more than 10 years later, that I realized that, oh, I didn't actually see the mercy ship. I saw the Logos ship. The biggest difference with mercy ships is that they are a hospital ship. So the Logos ship didn't have surgical or health care while I was visiting it. But the Mercy ship, they now have 2 ships, which is very exciting. And on their ships, they have a hospital and they have operating theaters, and they take on nurses and doctors, and they take on like, a proper crew. So there's like a captain, and we've got the deck crew, and then you've got engineers and cooks and cleaners, and the ships are a lot bigger. And so the other difference is that Mercy ships tends to spend a lot of their time in West Africa, whereas from what I understand, I think Logos Hope spends a little bit more time kind of closer to Australia. And their ministries are quite different. So Mercy Ship's very much healthcare focused, still has an outreach and a chaplaincy team as part of their ministry. And Logos Hope, from what I understand, is a little bit more kind of focused on evangelism and ministry kind of in different areas.
You'd been Googling for, every few years, and then one day you kind of came across this dietitian position for Mercy Ships.
It was about 2017, I think. And I was, doing my every couple of years Google and looking at the volunteer list of Mercy Ships. And I was just scrolling through the positions that were available. And I was really surprised. I was like, oh, there's a lot of spots available. And so I just kept scrolling. And then as I was scrolling, I got to one that said dietitian. And I was like I needed to pinch myself in that moment.
Is this a dream?
Is this real? Like how can this be real? How can they have a dietitian? Like I'm a dietitian, and at this point I was about like a year or two out of uni, so I had a little bit of experience by that point. And so I kept reading the position, and I was like, oh, like I've got about like just about the right amount of experience, and they've got, the role has a lot of involvement with children, and I'm like, oh, I really love working in that area. Yeah, I applied straight away, and I just I filled in that application, and I was like, pick me. With Mercy Ships, like they take people, and they kind of they like to have names of people who are interested, and so even if they haven't got a vacancy for the role that's been applied for, like they still like to have people's names, so that, because inevitably like a vacancy is going to come up because everyone's volunteering, and they're gonna need someone to step in at some point. And so I was put on that list of dietitians who were interested. And then I got this email out of the blue in March. I was like, oh, and they were asking me if I wanted to come and be the dietitian for 10 months. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. 10 months is a really long time though.
When you got the email, did you doubt?
It wasn't that the decision was wrong. I think it was just the kind of questioning myself of like, oh, because I'd never been away from, like, I've never been away for that long. Like I've just never been outside of Australia for that long. Like I'd been out for a couple of months, but not for 10. And like I'm fairly adventurous, but I think it was just kind of that length of time kind of intimidated me at first. I was like, oh, that's a really long time.
How did you prepare to go? Because there wasn't actually a whole lot of time in the end, like 3 months between getting the email and starting. That's not long.
No, it's not. A couple of things. So I ended up quitting my job that I had here in Australia. I watched as many YouTube videos as I could find about mercy ships. So there's a surgeon on board. His name's Dr. Carey Parker, and he's been with mercy ships for more than 30 years. And so he and his wife have served there together for a very long time, and their children were actually born on the ship. And their daughter had made this huge series of videos about what's it like to live on mercy ships, like what do we do, what do you pack, who are you going to meet, like how do you find your way around? And I devoured every single one of her videos. I would be at home and folding my washing, and I would just be watching another Karis Parker video just because I wanted everything. I wanted to know everything. One of my really lovely friends gave me a book that was written by the man who started Mercy Ships, and so I read that. I went looking for blogs and whatever I could find from anyone who had been on Mercy Ships, and just basically looked for every piece of information, made a long list of, okay, what were the things I can pack in my very small bag that I'm allowed to take.
Yeah, I was going to say they would have limitations because there's so many people on the ship, right?
That is correct, yeah. And so the ship that I have volunteered on, the Africa Mercy, is the smaller of the two ships that Mercy Ships now has. And so I was gearing up to go and live in a cabin that I shared with three other girls. And in that cabin, I had my one cupboard, and we were told don't bring a normal suitcase, bring a collapsible duffel bag because you need to store that under your bed, and it's a small space. So you can't just bring your big suitcase and every single thing that you need. But at the same, in saying all of that, yes, I had to be picky about what went in my bag. Mercy Ships is a very unique organization. I've had one friend kind of describe it as a big church camp. In many ways, and there is some truth to that, because you're living and you're working and socializing with this group of 400 people that yes, it's 400 people, but it's very transient, and so there's people coming and there's people going all the time. But then you kind of as you're there for a longer period, you kind of find your group and you find your people, and the majority of people there are Christian, so you've got these really cool shared values, and you're all volunteering to be there, and so everyone's usually quite excited about being there and excited about the work that's happening.
Oh, that's so great. I'd love to know more about your experience. I'd love to also know about the Mercy Ship's process itself, in terms of, obviously it's a healthcare ship. There are surgeries, hundreds of surgeries that are performed every year, but there is a long process in terms of choosing who gets surgery, and it can just be it's a really tough kind of thing to go through. Can you share about what goes on right from the start all the way through to the end?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the patient's perspective, it's massive. So the way it works for Mercy Ships is they get an invitation from the country that would like to have them visit. And so they start kind of building connections and building relationships with this country and doing logistical conversations kind of 2 years before they even arrive, just to make sure that everything the ship needs in order to function is present. And so before the ship arrives, I'm not sure how many months, maybe it's 3 or 6 months before the ship arrives, they start to advertise that the ship is coming to everybody who lives there. And so Mercy Ships has to kind of keep a narrow range of surgeries that they do. And so they're advertising everywhere. And so they've got radio commercials, they've got posters, they've got the governmental health team is aware of the types of surgeries that Mercy Ships does. And so the word is just spread, and it just goes out everywhere as far and as widely as possible. And so once that's done, Mercy Ships, they set up dates that they will be kind of visiting particular towns. And the invitation is put out for people that think that they have, something that Mercy Ships can help them with, to then attend on those days and be screened by a nurse. And so those days are massive. I haven't been part of one, but I'm good friends with what they call the advanced team, who goes out ahead of the ship to do all this screening. And so what happens is there's these huge queues. And so there's hundreds of people that turn up. All of them are in need. All of them have some sort of health problem. And pretty much because there's just so many people, the nurses that are part of this team have about a minute or two with each patient to try and quickly determine, like, is this a problem that Mercy Ships can help with or not? And so those are really, really hard days for the nurses involved, because there's so many people that they have to say no to. Like, the amount of no's that they hand out far exceeds the amount of yeses that they can give. And so at the end of that day, the people that have got a yes are then asked to, like, they'll be given another date at which Mercy Ships will actually come and pick them up and take a whole group of people from their hometown, and they'll bring them to the ship to have more kind of conversations and more assessments with the Mercy Ships team. So these patients, they might have their yes and they might have their date, but their date might not be for another few months. And so there's lots of kind of back and forth that happens with the team on the ship and people that have that yes, to make sure that we don't lose contact with them. Because when you're like, we're talking, this is West Africa. I was in Senegal. And so we're talking about people that not everybody's, yes, a lot of people have a mobile phone, but not everybody does. And so sometimes the phone number that's given out is for that person's neighbor, or it's for that person's uncle, or, you know, it's someone that may not necessarily like live directly with them. And so it's this, very kind of, and sometimes it's even for like the church pastor, like the degrees of separation just continue. And so you're doing everything you can to like stay in contact with people to make sure that they turn up on the day that bus is there to bring them to the ship. And so for some of them, like that bus journey will be hours, like it might be 10 hours long over roads that are sometimes like really unsealed, and like it's dusty and it's hot and it's a long trip, but they're so excited because there is this hope that they're going to get surgery to help them with whatever is going on for them. And so like the really common surgeries that Mercy Ships has been doing, they do a lot of like burns reconstruction. So patients that have had big burns and lots of scarring can get surgery to try and like help, because sometimes they can't move their wrists, they can't move a joint of some sort. Maybe it's their knee. They get big skin grafts to try and release that joint. For other patients, they might have bent legs. They might have rickets. Other patients will come and they'll have these big growths on their jaw. And that's something, you know, it's very visible. And so they're coming and with the expectation and the hope that Mercy Ships can get rid of, help remove this growth. Or there's children that come and they have a cleft palate or a cleft lip, and once again, and they're coming with the hope that can be repaired. And so they make the bus journey, they arrive at Mercy Ships. Mercy Ships has a big kind of hostel type setup. They call it the Hope Center. There's lots of bunk beds and everyone's fed and looked after, and they kind of wait there in the few days while they have their appointments with the nurse. And so they have a second screening to check that, okay, yes, this is something that Mercy Ships can help with. Then there's a second screening day, this time with the surgeon, to be to give the final yes, this is something we can help with. And then after that, they're giving their date. And so their date should be within a couple of weeks of that surgeon visit. But it's lots of waiting. There's so much waiting that happens. There's so many kind of hurdles that they have to get through. But that by the time that surgery date arrives, it is so exciting, because the wait has been huge. But it's for them to get through and have yes all the way, it's massive. And it's exciting for all of us to be oh yes, it's the day you're getting your surgery today, and we get to be part of this journey with you, and we get to see you through the whole process. So it's a big thing.
Is it common to have yeses and then a no at the another screening?
It does happen. Yeah, and that is some of the toughest situations, because people come and, they've got that expectation that, I'm going to Mercy Ships, they're going to help me. And then they have that second screening with the nurse, or they have that screening with the surgeon, and something has changed. That means that Mercy Ships can't safely operate, or there was, you know, something else that wasn't kind of identified in that first period to tell us that, like, actually, like, this isn't what we thought it was, and this actually is outside our scope. Mercy Ships does a really good job. They do a really good job of the things that we do, of the things that they do.
Yeah.
But like, there's only so many things they can do. Like, they can't fix everything, and like, there's still limitations in the resources that they have and in the skills that they have, and even in the surgical types that they have. Even though, like, we have some of the best, like, doctors, like Western doctors, like, coming in and volunteering, there's still limitations. Like, you can't have every single surgeon come and visit the ship, and you can't be equipped for every single ever, like, possible surgery. So it's really devastating. Those are some of the hardest moments. And even, like, for me, sometimes I would be asked to kind of start working with a patient before they had a final okay. And so I would mostly be working with people because they're malnourished. And so the hope is that like, I would work with them, help feed them up, help get them to a better weight to make them safe for surgery. And so we'd start working and start, you know, giving them things to eat and doing different things, but then there would be a no. And it's really hard for both the patient and everybody involved, because no one wants to say no. Like, we really don't, but it's just the limitations of just working in healthcare, basically.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Jess, tell me more about your role as a dietitian. Obviously, Mercy Ships is focused on the surgeries, but, you know, as you said, your job to kind of get people up to a healthy weight. What else do you do?
Yeah, so that's a big part of it, and so getting up to a healthy weight, and it has a few different faces. So there's been like a large group of babies that I got to work with that had cleft lips and cleft palates, and so they would be breastfeeding, or maybe some of them would have started solids, and so getting them up to a healthy weight involved working a lot with their parents and mostly their mums, and kind of teaching them, like, okay, what can we feed your child to help them go from being malnourished to well nourished? How can, like, I help you give them confidence to feed their child, because a lot of the time, if their baby had a cleft lip, they were actually really nervous about feeding the baby thing, or even if they had a cleft palate, so a hole in the roof of their mouth, they were really nervous because they were worried that, if I give them too much, if I let them drink too much, they're going to swallow the milk down the wrong way, and they're going to cough, and they're going to get sick. And so there was a couple of mums that were like just really scared to feed their baby. And so sometimes getting people to a healthy weight was like just giving them confidence that they're actually going to be okay. And it's okay to feed them, and it's actually better to feed them. There would be slightly older kids that would come through, and so a lot of that was trying to work with these really cute 2 and 3 year olds who didn't want to eat and were not interested in the things that I had for them, but they really needed it. But fussy eating is something that happens not just in Australia, but happens in Africa as well.
Toddlers are the same everywhere.
Oh, they are. They really are. And so that keeps life interesting. There was a couple of adults that came through, and they were really underweight. So one of them, he was a young man. He weighed 30 kilos when I met him. Yeah. And he was 170 centimeters tall. He had something called ankylosis, which basically meant he had a frozen jaw. And so he couldn't open his mouth, like he couldn't open his bottom jaw in the normal way. And so he could still get food in, but he couldn't chew, in the way that people normally can. And so helping him get to a healthy weight was finding strategies and finding things that he could still like kind of get in between his teeth to help him gain weight, but also like quite a high volume of food, because I needed to get him to about 43 kilograms. And that you don't do that in a night.
No.
But like that was, really interesting.
How long did that take you?
So I've been to Mercy Ships twice. So when I went in 2019, it took 6 months with him to get him up to his 43 kilograms. But because of COVID, which happened in 2020, because it was March 2020 when he got to his goal weight. It was 6 months. He'd been working with us for 6 months. He'd been away from home for 6 months, like just with us, and basically just for the purpose of eating and gaining weight. And he got to his goal weight, and it was the most exciting thing ever because it was so long in the coming. And so it was Monday and he got to his goal weight. And so we went and saw the surgeons and we're like, look, he's ready. Like he's got his goal weight. And then as that week progressed, we were having these new meetings every day about, like COVID, there's COVID on ships. But don't worry, ours is okay. And then there was COVID in Senegal and they're like, we're watching it really closely. And so on the Monday, he got to his goal weight. On the Friday, we were told we have to stop all surgeries and we have to go. And that was devastating, not just, for the work, but also just for this guy, because he had worked so hard for so long and we had to go. I was so impressed by him and his response when we told him that we had to go and that he couldn't have his surgery. Like it was like that. It just blew me away, like how like peaceful he was. So it's really interesting. Senegal is a mostly Muslim country. They really pride themselves on their focus on peace, like just peace in their lives. And like it was very inspiring to see that, because his response was just like very much, it's okay, it's in God's hands, if he wills it, then it will be. And I was like, okay, wow, that's very unexpected. And so we left Senegal. We left behind like all these patients that had been promised surgery but didn't get it. When they made the decision to leave the country, there was patients in the hospital who had just had surgery that day. And so it was a huge effort to find safe places for those patients to go. So Mercy Ships worked really hard to connect with local hospitals, most of them run by other non-government organizations, to kind of transfer patients across to make sure that they still got the care and the recovery that they needed. We packed, like, because we're a ship, like we had everything. Like we had all their medications already. We had all their bandages. We had all their like special nutrition supplements. And so every patient that had to leave Mercy Ships was sent with these like huge bags of everything that they could possibly need for their recovery. But then we left. So that was huge. I really wanted to be there when Mercy Ships went back, because that was something that they'd said the whole time, was that Mercy Ships had said, we're coming back, we're going to come back. And so I wanted to come back as well and be part of that, because I wanted to see my patients like get their surgery and I wanted to see them recover. And so I came home and it took 2 years, but I got to go back with Mercy Ships the second time last year in 2022. And those patients that missed out, they all came back. All the patients and the families that I'd started working with, they all got to come back. The young guy who needed to go from 30 to 43 kilos, he came back. I'd been thinking about him like the whole time I was home. I was like, I wonder what's happened to his weight. And the dietitian in me was like, he's probably lost all of it. And he pretty much had. He'd gone back to 32 kilos. And so when I saw him again, I was like, okay, all right, so this is potentially going to take another 6 months. It took 4 to get him back to his goal weight, which is still a long time. It was, I think he was just really motivated and he knew what to do this time around. They all got their surgery. And so like on the other side of that, like my job becomes education again. So for patients who've just had their surgery, particularly if they've had surgery on their mouth, and for him, he had surgery on his jaw, they're a bit sore afterwards. And so the goal becomes, okay, you got to eat enough. You got to eat enough food, get enough energy, get enough protein so that you still recover well. But we can't just give you normal food because it's too hard to chew. So you might be getting purees, you might be getting a soft diet. And so my job is to kind of like find the things that people are willing to eat within those limitations. And the things that they're willing to drink as well. So we have this supplement called Manna, which is basically peanuts, and we make it into a smoothie. And it's nice because there's a lot less peanut allergies over in Africa than in Australia. And there's a lot of drinking of the manor while people are with Mercy ships. And then when they're well enough and they've recovered enough to go home, once again, it's education about, okay, so I know these are the foods that you have access to at home. I know that these are the foods that are affordable for you. And these are the things that are going to help keep you well in the future. And so there's a lot of that education that happens, both for the adults and for the kids, particularly for the mums who were breastfeeding or like formula feeding their babies, but maybe their baby is more than 6 months old now and so is old enough to start solids. So there's a lot of education like, okay, let's start with foods that have a lot of iron in them and are protein rich, and so we make sure that your baby grows. So it's a lot of, quite a multifaceted role. Is the dietitian position at Mercy Ships.
Yeah, it's so great. Do you remember after the young man had his surgery, what his kind of response and reaction was?
He was so understated in so many things. And like you'd look at him and you'd be like, I could tell that you're really excited and you're really happy. But he wasn't one of these guys to like kind of like get up and jump around the room and dance. But you could tell, you could just look at his face and you could just like see like how happy he was like in his eyes, and like he had a mirror and like he was like always having a look at like, oh, how's it look now? And like he could open his mouth the first time, and so it was like these little kind of like clues that told us like, oh, like, yeah, he's really happy about what's just happened. And like his profession was that he was a tailor. And so even the day that he kind of got admitted to the hospital, he was wearing this new outfit, and like, because by this point, like I thought I'd seen like all his clothes. I've been meeting him like once or twice a week for weeks at this point, and then he came out with his new outfit, and I was like, where'd that come from? And he's like, this is, I made this for this time. So yeah, he was very, very happy.
Yeah, that's so great. Now, Jess, you returned back to Australia 6 months later after your second stint, December last year, and you decided to start a whole new journey.
So I'm actually studying medicine now. So as much as I really love my role as a dietitian, and I love the places that it's taken me and the things that I have learned, there's also been kind of moments where I get a bit frustrated, where I'm like, oh, I really want to help. Like I want to help more. Like I want to be able to help more in ways that aren't just that aren't just nutrition. And I've kind of looked at the doctors that I've worked with along the way, and I'm like, oh, I really want your job. Like I want to do your job. But I want to bring the things that I've learned as a dietitian with me. And so I'm studying medicine now. I am 7 months into my first year. It's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that I've been really excited to acquire. Not going to downplay how hard it is. Like the volume of information that you need to know is massive. But I'm doing it because I really want to I want to go back to Mercy Ships. I'd really love to go back as their doctor one day. And I'd also really love to go where God sends me. And I think like as a doctor, there's a lot of doors that kind of open with that profession. Like there's a lot of other kind of charities and organizations that want doctors, they want nurses, whether it's because of an acute need or they're based like more long-term. And I just think, kind of like those mission settings as a doctor, it really excites me. And I'm really excited about the opportunities and the things that the things that I can do to help, because that's the big motivation is I really want to help. I really want to use the things that God's given me to help people. And I think this kind of combination of things that I've learned from dietetics plus medical knowledge, it's quite a different sort of perspective. And so because a lot of doctors, we don't really get a lot of nutrition education. Like I know I'm only 7 months in, but there hasn't been that much on food. And I'm like, I know some things that, the normal doctor doesn't. And so I'm really excited to combine those and just bring that and help people.
Look, Jess, as I've spoken to you, your faith really does shine through. But I want to ask you, I guess, a bit more explicitly, how has your faith informed your work, both as a dietitian and now as a doctor in training?
So I think it's been a big driver, because I think God has given us so much. So much. I get to live in Australia, and this is such a privileged country, and I have so much, and I don't want to take that for granted. But even like looking outside of materialistic things, like looking at just life that God gives us, like he gives us a life, and he gives it for us to live to the full. And that in itself, I think, just is something I am just so grateful for, and I want other people to have that. Whatever ways I can bring that to people, that's really what I want to do. And so I've kind of seen healthcare as kind of effective means of helping people and of blessing them and of sharing the things that I have. And so, yeah, I think that was a lot of motivation for becoming a dietitian, was to help people in that way. But now becoming a doctor, to also continue to help them in healthcare, but also to bless them and to bring Jesus into the workplace and to bring Jesus in very tangible ways to people's lives.
Fantastic. What a great way to end. Jess Mepstead, it has been an absolute honour to have you on the Finding Hope podcast today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So admire the work you're doing, and all the best for the rest of your degree and hopefully your return to a Mercy ship one day.
Thanks so much, Georgia. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much to Jess Mepstead for generously sharing her story today. To learn more about the work of Mercy Ships, you can visit their website, mercyships.org.au. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening today. To help this podcast reach more people, you can rate, review, subscribe, and share it with a friend who might need a little bit of extra hope right now. I'll leave you with this verse. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick or in prison, and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Matthew 25, verses 44 and 45. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.